Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus coming at you with all the cards, or at least most of them, that have showed up from the Lord of the Rings set in the modern format in the first couple weeks. Starting off with the One Ring. Now this is a card that a lot of people questioned how powerful it would be, what kind of a shakeup would it have in the format. Turns out this is one of the more impactful cards that has hit modern in quite some time. Probably maybe the most impactful card since Modern Horizons 2, sans possibly Leyline Binding. This card, indestructible, never enters the battlefield, gain protection from everything if you cast it. At the beginning of your upkeep, lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Tap, add a burden counter, draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. Now this is what Jace Mind Sculptor wish it was. This is, comes in, gives you protection from everything, and draws you 3 cards in the first turn cycle. Obviously, there are ways to abuse this, as if you've watched Aspiring Spike stream at all, you've seen a ton of different brews with this card, but even notable modern powerhouses or notable modern decks such as Tron, 4-color Omnath, people are trying to jam it in Blue-Eye Control, Yawgmoth, Amulet Titan, you name it. If a deck isn't aggressive or a tempo deck like Scam or is it Murktide or Boros Burn, something like Hammer, people are trying to jam this in the decks. Now, remains to be seen how large of an impact on the format. Will this be a Leyline Binding or Renin 6 Ragavan level broken, or will this be Uro Oko Hogak broken? Kind of remains to be seen. Now, obviously, this being a 4-mana play and the fact that it has to resolve to have any impact is relevant. You know, Spell Pierce exists, Counterspell exists, Thoughtseize, etc. So there are ways to interact with it before it hits the battlefield. Leyline Binding once it gets on the battlefield, but still one of the most powerful and impactful spells, and it may actually be currently being held back from being played as much as it wants to be because of its absurd price tag. 130 tickets on Magic Online, kind of absurd. Obviously, demand hasn't caught up with, or supply hasn't caught up with demand yet, so the card is a little bit absurdly expensive, so it may see even more play than it currently does. Fortune, this is basically 1 part Reanimate Equipment, 1 part Sigarda's Aid, 1 part Pure Steel Paladin. The only thing holding this back from being more of a mainstay in Hammer is the fact that it costs 3 mana, and that space is kind of limited in those decks for over 2 mana plays. That said, it is a deck that has found at least one consistent home, that being Hammer Time. It could find play in other decks like, say, a Blue-White Affinity list, but mainly this is at home in Hammer, and that's where it stays. So it's a card that sees some amount of play, but hasn't overall had a huge impact on the format quite yet. Orcish Bowmaster, this is a legacy killer. This is a thing that makes Brainstorm and Ponder and all these other cards in Legacy quite a nightmare. Now, in Modern, there aren't as many cheap cantrips, powerful things like that. So it's still a role player. It's seen some amount of play, most notably in Rakdos Scam. Some people have attempted that a little bit in Yawgmoth as one of the tutor targets. Basically, it comes in, deals 1 damage to a player or any target, and amasses an Orc 1. Then anytime somebody or an opponent draws a card that's outside of their normal draw step, deals 1 damage, amasses 1. So, things like the One Ring and stuff can really feed this. Jace the Mind Sculptor, which obviously doesn't see as much play, but can kind of feed this, etc. So, Orcish Bowmaster is a card that's seeing some amount of role play, but so far has had a little bit of impact on Modern, definitely more of a card that's impacting Legacy. Delighted Halfling, this is an interesting one. Now, this is a mana dork that makes legendary spells uncounterable. So, you can make your Renin 6s, your Teferi Time Ravelers, your Omnaths, your Elish Norns, your, if you happen to be playing Shieldred, basically anything that like that can make them uncounterable. One other shell that I've seen it in, or at least played it in against, was a Winota shell. Now, Winota is a card that seems like it should be modern power level, as obviously it was banned in Pioneer, and maybe this is a card that can help push that in the right direction. But overall, this is a card that's mainly shown up in the Omnath shells, shown up in a few other, like, 4-color soup piles. But mainly, this is shown up a little bit and is a nice role player against counter spells and fixing mana for legendary spells. Reprieve. Color shifted remand without the counter target spell ability. Notably, this gets around anything that's uncounterable because of Cavern of Souls and such. It's basically remand meets what's the word? Unsubstantiate. Only you still get to draw the card, and it's white, so shows up in creativity. Can show up in various white mid-range decks that might want a tempo play. Which there aren't too many in the format currently, but this is something that can fight back against things like the One Ring and stuff, buy you some amount of time against it, and hopefully allow you to kind of close out the game or set up a strategy that can overpower what the One Ring does. And it's a nice thing for white to have access to in a card or a color that's probably the most underpowered in the format overall. So this one's kind of a two-parter. Generous Ent and Oliphant. Both of these are seeing play in Living End. They're big, powerful, beefy creatures that cycle for 1 mana. Living End is always looking to increase its density of powerful, cyclers, and these also help fix the mana in the deck. This has led to the number of lands being reduced in the deck from, say, 19 or 20 down to 15 or 16 in a lot of versions. So Generous Ent comes into play, creates a food token. It's a 5/7 reach creature. Oliphant is a 6/4 that whenever it attacks, another target creature gets +2/+0 on trample, which, it gets trample, which helps to punch through that last bit of damage. So, both very powerful commons that are something Living End was looking for and have kind of pushed that deck to the top of the food chain right now. The final card, this one really hasn't substantially found its home yet. And I think that's because a lot of the brewers have been working on things like the One Ring and Living End and Delighted Halfling, etc. This is a card that goes into a food deck. So it goes into, or synergizes decently with Asmo, and is part of a 3-card combo. This plus Cauldron Familiar and a sack outlet like Viscera Seer is an infinite combo. So whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. It's an artifact, Sacrifice 3 foods, return target historic card from your graveyard, artifacts, legendaries, sagas. The big thing with this, if you have Cat in play, say sack a Viscera Seer or some other sacrifice outlet, like Goblin Bombardments, there's a few others that I can see in my mind, but I can't remember the names of the cards off the top of my head. Basically, you sack it, make a food, use the food, bring the cat back, cat makes a token with Samwise, and just continues this loop. So you have an infinite scry loop with infinite damage loop. So that's why it has a lot of people excited. Now the downside, obviously, it's a 3-part combo, much like the old Kitchen Finks, Viscera Seer, Malira combo. So it's not always the easiest thing to set up, especially in a format that's even probably the most hateful it's been towards creatures in quite some time. But it is a card you should be aware of, and a card that might quietly slip under the radar for some time. So if you want to pick this card up, I would probably consider doing it soon, because as soon as somebody breaks it, price is going to go like this, like they have with some of the other stuff, like the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters. So these are the cards from Lord of the Rings, the new set that was released that has impacted Modern. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you like this kind of Modern content. I hope to see you for our next video.